Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to the very important 84th Formation Commanders meeting that was headed by the Army Chief at the GHQ. And a lot of the issues, of course, concerning the security and peace of the country were discussed. And along with that, of course, the issue of disinformation that has been highlighted many times before as well was also discussed. And this, of course, something that is affecting the ways in which the people of Pakistan are absorbing information and understanding the content that is being put forward on different mediums. And this is, of course, also important in terms of the way forward for the military institutions of the country and the impact that such false propaganda such as that was done in the aftermath of the protest rally of PTI and the smooth execution of the security forces after that as well that we saw. With reference to that, of course, this propaganda is something that was also mentioned by the Army Chief, who said that there needs to be strict action taken by the government of Pakistan with regards to such elements, and to understand exactly what will be the way forward, and the kind of fake news and propaganda that maligns institutions such as the Pakistan Army is something that needs to be handled with a lot of care, and then of course proposed forward in the rightful manner in terms of what needs to be the course of action. That is going to be our focus in the first segment of the show today. Our next one is going to take a look at the situation internationally, particularly of course in Gaza. We have seen, of course, that the genocide continues since last year, and since many years before that as well. We've seen that the suffering of the people of Palestine has continued, and this is of course quite concerning in terms of what we've been seeing, and the number of people, including women and children, that have been targeted and killed and brutally murdered. And of course that continues as we speak, even though the entire world recognizes that this is something that is indeed condemnable. But of course we've seen that powers are prevailing, and it seems that a lot of the countries in support of Israel are also facilitating this genocide and are not moving towards any conclusive ceasefire or any action to end the suffering of the people of Palestine. And this was reported by Amnesty International's latest report as well, talking about how what the Palestinians are facing is something that is made with connections to being treated like a subhuman. And we've been, of course, talking about how this is genocide for quite some time now. So that part, of course, is not new. But what needs to be done about it, and how we understand this genocide and how we understand the involvement of different countries, that is going to be the focus of our discussion at the end of the show, to understand the current situation, of course, the way forward. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal, and we've also been joined online for our first segment by Brigadier Retired Mr. Waqar Khan. Thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the discussion today. And Waqar Sahab, we're of course going to be also speaking to you with reference to what has been going on with the kind of discussions that have been there, and in the ways that we're going to be putting this forward. And of course, this will be something very important in terms of how we look at it. So Faisal, first I'm going to take your perspective on this in terms of the ways that we have seen disinformation spread, and we have seen many conferences such as today's, and of course headed by the Army Chief, speaking about what a big issue this is and how it needs to be treated. How do we get to the core of it, though, in terms of understanding where the problem lies and in terms of understanding what to do about it? Of course, we'll be talking about the political and religious elite involved, or other elements involved in terms of these propaganda. But before we go to that, I want your take in understanding the problem in itself: disinformation, fake news, propaganda. How do we understand these terms?
Yeah, Sana, it's a very good question. And when it comes to, of course, global impact, that is there. And of course, if we talk about the urgency in this context related to whatever is happening in the world and in the Western world, this phenomenon, it started way long ago, and now we are seeing that it is at its full-fledged. We are seeing it. And when it comes towards Pakistan, I mean, we very well know that initially it was started against Pakistan by the Indian side. We very well know about the Shrivastava group, how it was active from within New Delhi, and they had, it was exposed by EU Disinfo Lab, how they were utilizing so many forums, social media forums, to of course malign Pakistan when it comes to Balochistan, when it comes to women rights in Pakistan, when it comes to press freedom in Pakistan. The maligning factor, it was actually initiated by the Indians, but now what we are seeing is, of course, Pakistan's political fabric. When we saw the turbulence in the Pakistan's political fabric, suddenly there were a few of the chapters of within the political party itself, they got ignited and they were sitting outside. From outside they were doing this propaganda, or if they were not the ones who were initiating it, at least they were being part of it to promote it, to further ignite it in Pakistan, because they had the masses who were following them at the same time. But this at this hour, when we talk about Pakistan itself, disinformation is playing a role to, of course, further sort of create divides within Pakistan. But as I said earlier, Pakistan's security forces, Pakistan's intelligence services, they are digging deep into it. And when it comes to Chief of the Army Staff, he is having a focus on it. And that is why in recent times we have been seeing that the much needed hurdles, like we know that there is firewall which is introduced in Pakistan, and the imposition of that firewall entirely has everything to do with this, because in the modern times it's so easy to propagate anything within your masses, and them masses, they can easily get influenced by it, and the narratives which we want to, of course, have within our society to be promoted, they don't get promoted. And the fake news and the disinformation within the society, it spreads like a fire, a wildfire, which becomes a menace, and that menace, of course, needs to be countered. And when it comes to narratives itself, disinformation is pivotal when it comes to shaping the wrong narratives, so that it can affect the institutions, it can affect the government, it can affect the state itself. As I said earlier, initially it used to be ignited by the Indians, and it get towed by people within Pakistan or outside Pakistan, few of them not knowing what they're doing, and few of them intentionally doing whatever they're doing. But now, of course, it is more like people who have been just being part of it in the past, now they are the ones who are generating it, and Indians, they're just sitting back and they're just trying to promote it. And as we always highlight the factor of how it gets promoted and who has the control over what gets promoted and what doesn't get promoted. If I'm somebody who's having a balanced sort of approach towards all of the problems in Pakistan, my narratives would never get highlighted. But if somebody is anti-Pakistan, if somebody is speaking against the institution of Pakistan, somehow the algorithms which are being set in the modern times, they are in a way supporting the ones who are the anti-forces or anti-voices against the institutions, against the government. So this is where the problem lies. I mean, very recently we saw that the elections of US, they were a premier example. They can be considered as a premier example, because in them the mainstream media, it was worthless. The mainstream media, they came up with the surveys and each and everything that was in the favor of Kamala Harris, but when the results appeared, it was all about Donald Trump. And the only reason behind it is that social mediums, they were backing him, and social mediums were playing the pivotal role. To me, people used to watch TV to get enlightened in past. Now they simply pick up something in their hand and they just want to go through it within 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and they want to enlighten themselves, be it odd enlightenment or be it the right enlightenment. But they are trying to resort to their hand rather than their wall. So that is where the problem lies. And to me, I believe if somebody wants to really fix whatever this menace is, then they have to focus on social media more rather than mainstream media. I mean, I'm still seeing that the mainstream media still gets more sort of importance from the right corners. They shouldn't be getting more importance. Rather, the social mediums, they should be getting more importance, and especially in an age where we are seeing that the individuals, they are more empowered in terms that their viewership is more than the organizations like TV channels. I mean, there are individuals who carry more weight. So them individuals, they need to be sat down with and talked to, and of course tell them that these are the wrong lines they are promoting or propagating, and they need to fix themselves.
Right, absolutely. And Farrukh, I want a similar question from you as well, because the understanding of the problem in itself will guide the solution, and I want to know whether we actually truly have that in place. It's something that of course we're dealing with globally as well, but it's really impacting the political and law and order situation in the country. But in terms of responding to it, do we really understand and are able to define and distinguish in terms of what is going on, in terms of the elements involved, in terms of the nuances of even political rhetoric for that matter, or freedom of speech for that matter, and how are we then navigating all of this before we even start talking about what needs to be done about it?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the question. I think that I was listening to, when I was listening to Faisal, I was smiling. I don't know whether you noticed
I
that
did.
or not. So in our story, every time we talk about disinformation or misinformation, it starts and ends with India. But there are certain mistakes that we have also committed in this country, right? When the country was created at that time, it was more convenient to have an ideological bent, and the country continued with that for quite some time. It continued till the war on terror started. At that time, the country had to actually take 160-degree turn, and at that time, the country's Urdu press, which was finding new voice on television, all of a sudden had a clean break with the state narrative. Since then, what we have seen is that today people talk about post-truth society in the world, but in Pakistan that arrived somewhere 24 years ago, right, when war on terror more or less started. At that time, what happened was that on one side, the state would actually go after terrorists. On the other side, what we saw was our intellectuals, so-called intellectuals, sitting on television and obfuscating everything, bringing in conspiracy theories, which actually undermined the state's narrative. I remember that, and then there was another huge magnifying issue. That was the departure of General Pervez Musharraf. At that time, because the lawyers movement was there, all of a sudden conspiracy theories became a cottage industry, and that has been increasing for quite some time. I remember the day General Musharraf was in America, I think, and suddenly there was some kind of breakdown of electricity, and power was gone throughout the country for 8 hours. All of a sudden, SMS, at that time you did not have WhatsApp, at that time you did not have many other fora. What happened was the SMS actually started circulating that there has been a coup, General Ahsan has taken over, and General Pervez Musharraf is ill and he is hospitalized. And at that time, I was here in Islamabad, so I actually took out my car and went to the Chairman Joint Chief of Staff Committee's office and just saw with my own eyes that there wasn't any coup of that sort, right? This happens when there is lack of trust between the state and the people, and that is because the state is doing what is right now, but the problem is that the intelligentsia has a different bent. And after that, what has happened is repeatedly what we have seen is increase in propaganda, and then along comes the social media's age, and then all of a sudden all those people who were restrained by one means or the other on television screen, they went totally nuts on social media, and that has increased. The culmination of that was 2018 when PTI came to power, because that was the party that benefited most from conspiracy theories in the country. And now it is the age of AI. So everybody is talking about deepfakes and possibility of things actually going totally haywire. The problem right now is that anybody who says that deepfakes, by the way, I would call deepfakes myth, that they cannot be busted. Why would that be? Because if you just look at the text that is generated by some of the best AI, like Google's but it used to Brad, now it is Gemini, or for that matter, Chat GPT. And you ask them that you create text which is more human-like, and then you go to AI detector software, and in presto, within seconds, that software identifies it as AI-generated text. That means that while AI in deepfakes might be increasing, it is also improving in fact-checking. If you actually apply that, excuse me, you can actually correct most of the disinformation which is generated by AI. But then what you need, and the Western countries have actually started employing that method. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, the government doesn't focus on counter narratives. Instead of actually, focusing only on curtailing those voices which are spreading hate, what you need to do is you also need to have a counter argument, especially fact checkers. If you have fact checkers which are trusted by the common man on the street, things improve manyfold. And we have seen, if there is an honest answer, no matter how many followers there are, if you actually use the right kind of voice and right kind of message, people are not going to just totally disbelieve what you are saying. I have seen it with my own eyes. Recently, when there was talk of so many people killed in Islamabad and everything, I just did a small video, and I highlighted the narrowness of the place where this might have happened, the narrowness of time frame that was being mentioned. And I said that if so much blood is spilled, where did the bodies go? Were they uploaded into the cloud? They were not, right? So naturally, the moment you actually start speaking the truth, other people, conscientious people, even from within PTI, start actually questioning the premise. So what you need is a good, effective, smart counter narrative. Without that, what will happen is all these people get new lease on life, and you cannot control them.
Right. We've also been joined by Barrister Safi, Ghauri, and I hope you can hear me, Barrister.
Yeah, you perfectly well, Sana.
Great. Thank you for joining us in the debate. And I want your perspective on what we're talking about, of course, misinformation and false news and propaganda. But we've spoken about what these terms, the kind of problems and nuances these terms present to us globally and in Pakistan as well. And you can add to that context too. But I want your take also, particularly in terms of the specific ways in which it has been mentioned today in the Formation Commanders Conference, with reference just 2 days ago, in terms of what has been going on with reference to the political and religious elite in the country, with reference to, of course, the aftermath of the BTI rally in the capital, and the kind of fake news and propaganda that we've seen coming in from such a political party, and of course others in the political domain as well. So what really can actually be done within the Pakistani context and within this political context in terms of the maligning or the kind of campaign that the Chief Army Staff has spoken about, and how military institutions in particular are being targeted, and how that is shaping then the narrative or perception of the people of Pakistan?
So, Sana, that's an excellent question. And right off the cuff, I would invite everyone, just anyone at all who is listening, to conduct an experiment by themselves. I have personally done this, and it has borne shocking results. So once again, this is an experiment that anyone can do. In fact, there are two experiments that I would suggest. Firstly, go online and look for anti-army propaganda that's taking place. Especially go online and look at famous hashtags on Twitter that are targeting the Chief of Army Staff personally, and just start clicking on the profiles. As you start clicking on the profiles, you will notice that, of course, a lot of them are true. There are many people who are genuinely against the Pakistan Army and the Army Chief. But you will notice that close to 70 and 80% of them then are talking about things that are related to the BGP, to the Congress, that are talking about Brahmins and how Brahmins are being persecuted in Kashmir. And you'll start to understand that these are all Indian accounts that are posing as Pakistani accounts, pretending to be Pakistanis. That's one thing that's happening. The other thing is, of course, bots. You will see that they are bots. They've just been created. Random accounts that were made only 2 days ago, 1 day ago, with the sole purpose of making sure that one particular hashtag that is spreading goes forward. That's the first experiment, and I want everyone to just keep an open eye and just do it. I mean, you could say that, oh, look at the stats, they show that the army is very unpopular because it's trending online. But then we need to look at who is pushing those trends, and when you look at that trend, you will understand that it's nowhere as unpopular as the trends are making you believe. The second aspect that I want to educate the users on, the viewers on, is the dead internet theory. The dead internet theory is something that they can search online. It is a theory that about 50 to 60% of all the voices online are actually bots. They're not humans to begin with. These are algorithms and bots that can be bought. And famous movements, like famous movements such as MAGA, Make America Great Again, this was bot driven. The famous idea of how Hamas killed 40 Israeli babies that resulted in mass disinformation that Israel weaponized was something that was later debunked to be completely untrue, is something that was driven by bots. And countless examples, like I could continue to give you many examples. But one thing that we need to keep in mind is that the majority of all the world's misinformation statistically is coming from India. This India itself is a victim of misinformation. Indian oppositions are victims of self misinformation. Indian civil societies are victims of misinformation. But India has primarily become the world leader in spreading misinformation because of its animosity with Pakistan. And you can see the same thing, by the way, happening for Bangladesh right now. You can see the same thing happening for Maldives. You can see the same thing happening for Sri Lanka. Just look around and you will see that you will find very similar narratives, that the army of Bangladesh is a traitorous army, the army of Sri Lanka is a treacherous army, the army of Maldives is a treacherous army. You will continue to see all of these things time and again. Now, this brings me to the point that Farrukh Pitafi was saying, and I completely concur with it, which is that the only way out is to um, have your own counter narratives. There is nothing else that you can do. There is something else that you can do, by the way. All the biggest countries in the world are doing it, other than the USA. If we look at the world's biggest country, the US, they have extreme monitoring, firewalling going on. You cannot say anything that is anti-US. You cannot publicly support any terrorist party that is deemed terrorist, like such as Hamas, in the United States without the CIA knocking at your door in 10 minutes. That's not going to happen. We know that the CIA is watching your every movement. In fact, they have the National Security Agency, the NSA, which monitors every single thing that you do. So we know that the USA has the strictest firewall in the world. But publicly, Russia also has a firewall, and they have chosen not to engage with the Western controlled media, so to speak. China has its own media system altogether. They have just created their own media systems. They do not engage with what we see as media at all. And right now, I keep saying this, but I'm in Brazil. Brazil banned Twitter. And the reason why Brazil banned Twitter is once again because of misinformation. And Brazil, despite having BBC Brazil, despite having CNN Brazil, the local versions of all the famous TV channels continues to monitor them to make sure that the news that is going out is correct. Now, in our case, I feel Pakistan has taken an overly lax stand. I see people on television day and night spreading misinformation. I see people online spreading misinformation. In fact, even this whole idea of the firewall is being spoken about so much that it feels like there is no firewall in Pakistan. I mean, the only thing I can see is that the firewall, if there is any, isn't working at all. and and having a firewall is one of those counter narrative things that Farrukh Pitafi was talking about. The UK has a firewall, Australia has a firewall, Germany has a firewall. All of these countries have popular acts of the parliament that pass firewalls. There was a popular demand to install firewalls in these countries. So why is suddenly the firewall such a big issue in our country? India has it, Saudi Arabia has it, UAE has it. There is no country that I can think of other than African states that do not have them and cannot afford them. So every time we try and do something, every action that we take, it becomes highly controversial. The reason why it becomes highly controversial is because Indian content will get filtered out. India doesn't want that. So it's much better for India just to constantly make everything, such as our installation of a firewall, such as our attempts to try and educate the journalists on how to do proper journalism. Everything then becomes a problem in Pakistan, and the public is paying a price for this. The army and the government of Pakistan has just issued data as to how much losses we have experienced because of these protests. uh, these are losses that are quantifiable, and these are losses that are going to affect the poorest of the poor, people who will be deprived of medicine, food, and water because of the country not being able to pay for these things. So all I'm saying is that please we need to understand that our desires to speak does not trump somebody's need to eat. There are poor people who need to eat first, and only then can we start talking about other things like freedom of speech and assembly.
Right, absolutely. And Faisal, I want your perspective on what has been spoken about with reference to counter narratives. And understandably, of course, since, of course, there's so many other aspects that we're talking about in terms of dealing with this issue, this is important in terms of playing the game or bringing forth your own narrative. And I want your perspective on what has been done with regards to that, particularly from the military institutions, from ISPR, from the government side, in terms of ensuring that the way forward or the right image or what narrative they want to be able to present to the public and what they want the public to be able to see is something that is registered and absorbed by the people and is put forward in the right way. Is that something that still perhaps needs more value addition, or where do you think is the problem in terms of the counter narrative not being strong enough?
Yeah, that's where the problem lies. Earlier this week or last week, we highlighted this aspect that there is, a large number of people who are working on the social mediums, and they are trying to control whatever the narratives or fake narratives are persistent around us on our social mediums. But they are them people, no matter how hard they try, probably they are not the right people to do it. I think we need to follow the examples from the West, in which we see that the people who are hired for these kind of services, in which they are the ones who are supposed to give an other side of one thing which is being promoted or propagated on social media, like people like Nofal Mario, and there are many other names who are basically very expert in creating the counter narratives on the basis of truths, and they come up with the interesting facts, and they come up with the historic facts, and that's how it should be done, rather than making few people sit on social mediums and use whatever the garbage language they're using. I think that is not going
But
to work.
that's not all that
Yeah.
this is about, Faisal. What I want is that for you to answer in terms of the narratives that we have, the problematic ones that have been referred to in the meeting, in terms of how they're maligning or how they're false or how they're damaging the interests of the country. How do we build a counter narrative to that? It's not just in terms of, it's not a very simplistic thing to just say, okay, we'll present the facts, because this is the dynamics of these narratives or social mediums are different.
Sana, earlier when I was listening to Barrister Safi, he actually took me back to years when I was living in London, and almost, once a month or twice a month, in the weekend on Sunday, I used to go to Hyde Park. There's a speaker's corner, and I never used to go there for speaking, but I used to go there to listen what people say. In that speaker's corner, I mean, it was said that whatever somebody wants to say, they can say it. But that wasn't the case at all. If somebody said something against the Queen at that time, of course he got picked up. If somebody wanted to say something, individual generals or individual heads of the military services or something like that, they won't allow. Yes, you were allowed to say something about Jack Straw, who happened to be at that time defense minister of Britain. Anybody could say anything about him, but if you single out some generals or someone, that wasn't allowed there, because they considered their armed forces as to be the first line of defense, and that needs to be protected. Even in the speaker's corner, they are not allowed to say anything there, which shows you that the societies, the successful societies, though they give you permission to say everything, but they know what the red lines are. So there are red lines, there are ethics that needed to be of course shown to the world, shown to your masses at large, so that people are immune to it, so that people know that this is something wrong and I shouldn't be doing it at all. And this is the case here. I think the basic ethics, the basic lines, the basic red lines, they need to be drawn, and they need to be promoted within the masses, so that people, when they are using the social mediums, they of course, know what is right and know what is wrong. I mean, very recently I was invited at one of the think tanks, and there I highlighted this fact that to educate people, to educate masses at large, what we need to do is from as soon as somebody is done with the primary education, right after that there should be an extra subject of understanding the social media, understanding the future of social media, and it should be studied at the schools what social media is and how it should be perceived and taken. If there is a fake news, how to counter it and how to fact check it, so that our younger generation, as soon as they touch the social mediums, or as soon as they are able to be part of the social mediums, way before that, they know what social media is, and the exposure they get from that side, they are not someone who simply go along with it. They have to be equipped with the adequate knowledge to know what's right and what's wrong on the social media.
Right, and I want to build on that, Farrukh, in terms of the onus or responsibility, or perhaps preparedness of the public at large when it comes to absorbing the content. And I want your take in terms of how much of that is possible. I understand that all the education, and in terms of being able to realize that there is a need to decipher content and not just take it on face value. I understand all of that, but how much of that is truly possible and truly lies on the public at large, responsibility-wise or understanding-wise, in terms of taking that content and deconstructing it and understanding what is fake and what is not, and how much of that is in the governments or the institutions or the social media platforms' responsibilities to ensure or educate or bring forth content that is countering these narratives?
That's a beautiful question, Sana. But before I actually come to that, I wanted to actually highlight a couple of things that are very important. First of all, Pakistan's political history has been such that army from time to time has been in power, right? When you have been actually in power, what happens is that many diljale are there, right? Many people who are badly affected or who think that they are dispossessed because of that, right? And that is an invitation to anybody who wants to actually fish in the troubled waters or sail in the troubled waters. So that is there. Then because the nature of politics has so evolved in this country that anybody who is in power once goes out and then immediately it realizes why not actually attack these state institutions. So that has been building up for quite some time. Add to it the war on terror, which actually somehow unhinged the state and people's connection, because that was built upon one very important thing, and that was a religious ideology, right? Because the clerics all of a sudden started to boycott the state's narrative, all of a sudden we were lost in the woods. That said, my humble submission is anybody who does not realize what kind of sacrifices Pakistan Army, Pakistan Armed Forces, Pakistan's intelligence forces, Pakistan's law enforcement are actually rendering even as we speak, they should wake up and smell some coffee. Those people have been sacrificing daily. They are being killed daily. So it is incumbent upon anybody who's conscientious to realize that there might be a time when you were aggrieved with the army, but at this moment the actually threat comes from Fitna, Khawarij, TTP and so many other forces that might actually want to actively undermine your lives and who want to destroy you. Having said that, now I wanted to actually go to two things that Barrister Safi said, and they are very fascinating, right? Because while he was talking about the need for a firewall, and I'm impartial to the concept. Whatever the state has to do, it will do it. It will not listen to me one way or the other. So go ahead, do whatever you want. But he pointed out that there is narrative that is built on your live television against firewall as well. So the problem is beyond social media. There's something else that is going on. You were talking about India's influence. I've been raising alarm about that since the day Narendra Modi's government came, because that was the time when all of a sudden India was totally hushed up because of the media, social media trolls, and all of a sudden strange things started happening to Pakistan as well. I have been target of Indian trolls for quite some time. My humble submission is that problem has spread. Let me give you a few examples. It is very easy to, when the state is struggling in such a difficult way, it is very easy to influence or find people who might be a moles, right? One strange example. India and China actually start fighting, have skirmishes. All of a sudden, India bans TikTok. What happens next? The very next day, PTA actually bans TikTok. Why would that be? Similarly, Pakistan's voices are being heard in America, elsewhere. All of a sudden, there's this narrative that is built that somehow it is creating problems for the country, right? And eventually, there are people who work as force multipliers, and they started hurting you. That said, then finally we did whatever we had to. But amazingly, India bans beef. All of a sudden, some gentleman actually goes to Lahore High Court and then comes to Supreme Court of Pakistan with a petition that beef should be banned in Pakistan also. So if you think that the problem is just social media, I mean, come on, my humble submission is the problem has grown. There are people inside us who might actually be trying to sabotage the system. But the concern now is regarding social media and the counter narrative. That was your question. There are very simple answers. For example, remember that recent episode that took place where there was claimed that a girl was raped in a university. And at that time, what frightened me, Sana, was all of a sudden so much reaction was there. People were ready to hit the ground running. And all of a sudden, when we started digging up, there wasn't that girl. It did not exist. She did not exist. Similarly, in those days, there was this claim that somehow Khan Saab had died in the prison. And all of a sudden, this parade to Islamabad. Then it was proven wrong as well. And recently, D-Chalk. I kept on watching it silently, although we were commenting here, but on social media I wasn't. That it started with a few claims of deaths, then it escalated to hundreds, then thousands, and then I thought that it would go beyond anything. And 1 day passed, 2 days passed, 3 days passed, the numbers is increasing, nobody is actually pulling it apart.
Right.
The only thing I needed to do was scrutinize the basics. And then all of a sudden that narrative was gone. This is the first layer. Expose the untrue versions through logic, through evidence, through your conviction. Then the second one is build on it and give a better explanation. For example, regarding D-Chalk, there's one way to think that there were these massive snipers who actually came all of a sudden who killed very quickly, Sana. I'm just going to conclude. They just killed so many people. All of a sudden, within 1 hour, the entire floor was washed, and then it was dried up, and then it was open for camera. Then you can realize that PTI's leadership lost its nerve and scarpered, because it did. Then you have to actually build up all these stories, and they did it, right? It is very easy to fight disinformation if you are playing it smart. Darkness does not have its own body. What it is called is absence of light. All you have to do to fight darkness is to light a candle.
Right.
Are we lighting the candle, Sana?
Right, absolutely. And Barrister Safi, I'll quickly take your perspective on this as well. You can add to the discussion, but we also want you for the next segment. So very quickly, if you want to add something on this before we move on.
This whole issue of misinformation and countering narratives, building counter narratives, all of these things I've been sort of thinking a lot about. I discuss this with friends, people like you and Farrukh, Pitafi and Faisal. All of these we have had offline discussions as well. My conclusion to the matter is simply that it comes down to who has more funding. Social media media, print media, TV media, all of these things have to be funded. It's TV advertisements, it's online advertisements. PTI has more funds than maybe all other political parties combined together. We also know this because we know that we have election spends in which we know that PTI outspends all other political parties. How they're able to outspend, we partially, of course, it has a lot to do with public contributions, but there are also cases like the foreign funding case. There are also people who are involved in the foreign funding case who are Indians. So once again, we don't know. We don't know where the funding is coming from, but what we know is that the more money, the more sugar you put in, the sweeter this gets. And this is one of the reasons why, despite the fact that the whole world right now stands against Israel, the pro Israel voice on media is still higher, still louder. Why it's louder is because they have more money. It's just that they're spending more than all Palestinians. We know that the United Nations records show that there is only one country that is voting against Palestinian cause. All the other countries are voting for the Palestinian cause. Despite an overwhelming majority of hearts that support Palestine, we do not see that translated on media. So it comes down to funding. And unfortunately, I don't think there is any political party in Pakistan that has the kind of funding that PTI does, especially given the fact that most of this funding is coming from abroad and is being spent abroad. Keep that in mind, that these Twitter accounts, all of these things that are happening are being paid for outside of Pakistan. It's not possible for the state to compete with that. Not for Pakistan, at least. That's what my opinion is.
Right, and I'm glad you talked about Israel because, of course, that's what our next segment is, and I want your take on that quickly as well. With reference to, of course, Amnesty International's report on genocide, it seems that a lot of media platforms are celebrating the fact that it has been called a genocide when we all know that since the past year or more, it is a genocide that has been continuing in Gaza, and it is very, very unfortunate that this is something that is still making the news. But with regards to the current situation, with reference to what is going on and with the ways that we have seen countries like the US, Germany, UK interact and continue to support in one way or the other what is going on in Gaza and with reference to Israel, what then is the way forward, if any, to help the people of Palestine who are suffering?
Asana, this is such an amazing question, and this makes for such an amazing case. So the Amnesty International report was an outstanding report. Why? Even though we have known for a while that it's a genocide, but why this is important is because for the first time, an international organization is not mincing words. For the first, this is on record, the first time an international organization has openly said it is a genocide. Even ICJ said it is a plausible genocide. Everybody has used semantics that would somehow protect Israel. For the first time, it says that no, this is complete annihilation and this is genocide and there is nothing else to it. Amnesty International, as we know, is a well recognized organization. It's well respected all over the world. But here's the thing, once again, so we know that Amnesty International is well renowned, it's well respected, its words carry some meaning. Regardless, did you see how the media covered it? Once again, I want to take you back to what we were saying. It was only the Guardian that first published it. The BBC did not even publish this news. I don't know if it's published it by until now, but yesterday when the Guardian had published it as its headline, no other British newspaper, and this news came from, this verdict from Amnesty, by the way, came from the UK. That is why I'm emphasizing the United Kingdom. No other UK newspaper, news channel was covering it. They had just refused to. They were like, no, we're not even going to tell the public what it is. And this shows what money can do. This is the power of money. And what does the Guardian say about platforms like Twitter? They have stopped their account on Twitter because they know that it's being funded. They know that it comes with a particular narrative. And so once again, watch these narratives closely. Understand that all of these narratives that you see online, that you see on media, are being funded by someone. And Israel is, of course, leading the way. But we see this in Pakistan as well. We can draw similar analogies as to what Israel is doing to what other political parties. I'm not saying they're doing the same thing on ground. What I'm saying is they're employing similar tactics to brainwash and to spread propaganda. So it's very shocking that nothing's going to happen. Once again, big countries have even refused to cover it properly, let alone acknowledge it, let alone do something about it. But this shows that tides are also changing. Time will hold them accountable, Sana. There's no way that this is not going to be held accountable.
That is, of course, the hope that we hold on to. Thank you very much, Barrister Safi, for joining us and being part of the discussion. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us in the debate. As always, that's all that we have time for. We'll now see you on Monday.